Hi, this is Julian Russell here with part 2 of Taking Charge of Your Life. The topic today is creating a vision for your life, or having a vision for your life. And that vision could be, what would happiness look like for you? Yesterday in part 1, we talked about how positive emotions lead to success. You need to generate positive emotions to have a vision of your life that's worth having, and to be proactive and make that happen. And if you haven't seen part 1, go back and take a look at that on the Life Talent page under videos. Part 2 is today, having a vision for your life. Part 3 is the next session after this, tomorrow, which is about self-belief. You can only be as successful, and you can only have as much in your life as you believe you can have. Well, of course, self-belief isn't enough. You've got to train, you've got to practice, you've got to take action, but you'll never surpass what you believe is possible for you. And part 4 is about small steps to change your life, all the different things that you can do at the end of this series that can, in a small steps, but in a practical way, can help you change your life and build your belief in your ability to change your life. I'm Julian Russell. I'm founder of the Life Talent Program. My life calling is helping people blossom, starting with myself. And there's a video going around about my own personal journey. Basically, I had to focus on blossoming because I could see the direction that my twin brother was going in when he started taking heroin and going down into that cycle that ended his life eventually. And so helping people blossom, starting with myself, isn't just a nice to have Hampstead type of approach to life. It's enabled me to thrive, to succeed and to thrive, or to survive, to succeed and to thrive. And in some ways, the work that I do now is a gift to my brother, because I made a poetic vow that if I couldn't help my brother, then I would help other people. I think I say more about that in the video, which is in more detail about my own personal story. So today's topic is to have a vision for your life that's really worth having. So what would that vision look like? What would your life look like? What would it sound like? What would it feel like? 3 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time. The time scale depends on how big or deep the vision is. We'll come back to that in a moment. But first I want to introduce you to a model from my colleague and friend Robert Dilts of NLP fame, called the Disney Creativity Strategy, because there's something really important in that approach. The basic idea is that there are 3 stages in the creativity process. The first is to dream, the second is to plan, and the third is to do risk analysis, or he calls it critic or constructive critic. And the important thing is that you have to do your dreaming first. If you're trying to dream your vision of the future while you're thinking about the practicalities of it, you're going to stop yourself dreaming big. So the first stage is to dream big. Later on, you can plan and be practical. And then later on, after that, you can stand back and do your risk analysis and look at what could go wrong and how you make your plan robust so that, that your worst case scenarios are tolerable and handleable. And so that's the first rule. The first rule is dream first, plan second, and do your constructive critic at the end of the process. That's the first rule. And the second rule is you can't criticize yourself during this process, and you can't criticize the dreamer, the you that dreams or the you that plans, but only the plan itself, and only at the end of the process. And of course, if you're a person who criticizes yourself a lot or undermines yourself, then tomorrow's session about self-belief will be particularly important. And everybody has some balance of the dreamer, the realist, the planner, and the critic in themselves. We all have some balance of that, but some of us are stronger at one than the other. So, for example, a lot of artists and poetic types and people in personal development are really strong dreamers. That may be their strongest. They may not be so strong at planning. A lot of business people can be good at planning, but sometimes they don't dream things that are really worth making happen. And some people are very good at finding fault and criticizing and seeing what could possibly go wrong, but they never let themselves dream enough, and they never really get into the planning phase because they're so risk averse. And of course, you know, it's good to know which one of these you're strong at. Are you a strong dreamer, or are you good at planning, or are you somebody who holds back because of fear and you never really get started? You could do something to improve yourself on each of these three, but actually a more synergistic, a more collaborative possibility, a more generative possibility, is to do this process with friends who fill the other parts of the spectrum for you. So if you're not so good at dreaming, find a friend who really is good at dreaming. The dream is the most important part of the process at this point. If you take away from this week, you know, from this session, one thing, it's to really have a beautiful dream. Don't think about the practicalities, that can come later. And so if you're not so good at dreaming, find a friend who is and ask them to come and spend time with you dreaming this through. So, you know, if you were in charge of your life, you know, if there was nothing stopping you from being in charge of your life, what would your life look like? What would it, you know, what would the movie be? What would it sound like? What would it feel like? And I always imagine, you know, the edited highlights of I'm not really a football fan, I have to say, but occasionally I look at some of that stuff on telly, and I do quite like the way that they do the highlights at the end of the match. So you don't get all, you know, whatever it is, 90 minutes of the match, but you get, you know, the key moments, the passes back and forth to score the goal. And then the goal, the shot from the goal shot from several different angles. And then perhaps you have a slow motion shot. And so what I want you to do is to create a vision that has all these different angles and perhaps has slow motion, the key moment. What will your life, you know, look like if you're taking charge of it? If you're happy and fulfilled in your life, what will that look like? What will that sound like? What will that feel like? And that's something to do now. I suggest that you write that out on a piece of paper, you know, or you write that out in your notebook. And perhaps there's a step to do beforehand, which I'm not going to ask you to do now, but you might write down the current circumstances of your life. Write a page on the current circumstances of your life. Then write a page on the dream for your life, the vision of how your life could be. That's the most important of the two things to write down. A vivid, beautiful, inspiring, motivational dream of how your future can be. So, you know, you could stop this video, you know, if you're watching it in video, or make a note to come back to this point. That's the first most important step. Once you've written that dream down, it is worth noticing how much of it is dependent on other people and how much of it is dependent on yourself. If you are in the Olympics, the one thing that you can determine is your speed and your, you know, how hard you train, and the, you know, your times or scores in your training. You can determine the amount of training that you bring to the Olympic Stadium, but you can't determine how other people will perform in the Olympic Stadium. And the same is true with a vision for your life. You know, if your vision is, you know, to be in a beautiful relationship with a wonderful person of, you know, whichever sex you like, or no sex at all, transgender or gender neutral, or all of those things, it's great to have that vision, but you've got to recognize that in the vision you have to be the sort of person who could attract that sort of person into your life. It's not enough to say, I want to have this beautiful future. But you have to say, I want to be someone who generates and creates this beautiful future. It's not enough to say, I'll have this wonderful job and I'll be the, you know, I'll get recognized and given the position I've always wanted, or I'm a musician and I'll get a great deal. You have to be the sort of person who attracts that sort of deal. Your musical standard has to be fantastic, or your songwriting, or the combination of things, your brand, your personal brand, all of that has to be given attention. So in the vision, see yourself as the sort of person who gets what they want in life, who has the ability to be in charge of your life. And actually, one of the the things that they say in relationship counselling, particularly if somebody's thinking about a divorce or your partner's left, and the person is in counselling, weeping about their life and saying, "Can you help me keep my relationship?" And what the therapist says is, "I can't help you keep your relationship, but I can help you be the sort of person who will have a great life, whether you stay in the relationship or whether you're single and perhaps find another relationship in the future, to be the sort of person who can handle both circumstances and situations." Nobody can predict outer success. Great entrepreneurs go bust more often than other members of the population. Millionaires have more bankruptcies than the rest of the population. It's not about whether or not you go bankrupt or things go wrong. It's about the business that you do after that, what it is that you do after that. I can't quite remember the statistic, and it may not be quite accurate, but I think they say that 90% of people whose businesses fail don't try to set up a new business again. But of the 10% who do, 90% of the people who try again a second time succeed. I don't know if that's quite accurate, but the basic thinking is accurate. Which actually reminds me, I have a friend whose business failed a little while ago, and I need to talk to him about this particular idea. I'm not going to mention your name because you might be watching the video. So the vision of being someone in the future who is in charge of your life. Nobody else is in charge of your life. You are in charge of your life. That's the first stage. And although we're doing a short video here, really that's something that you could spend days or weeks developing. I would write notes about it, write up your draft several times, have a notebook on it. If you are visual, paint a picture of it, or make a collage of it, or even make a storyboard of it. Some people like to cut pictures out of newspapers and make some sort of collage about it. That's the first stage. No realism, no practicality at all. The second stage comes later, which is the planning stage, which is, so when will I have achieved this by? What do I have to do to get there? What do I have to do to get there? How can I raise my game in all the areas of my life? When I'm talking to high-performing people, they say, well, actually, a lot of my business is going really well. I'm doing all the right things, or I'm doing all the right things in relationships, or I'm good at networking. I'm good at all of those things. And so then what you have to say is you say, well, actually, just increase, what you do, the quality of what you do by 1% in a lot of different areas, perhaps on a regular basis. So how do you keep stepping up to the mark, improving what you do? One of the questions is, over what period of time will it take to get to where it is that you want to go? And if you have a really big vision for your life, a business vision, it might be 10 years out, 10 years. So businesses sometimes write, if they have really big visions, a 10-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan. For us, people with small businesses, a 3-year plan seems quite far out. And then we can have a 1-year plan. And then we can think about, well, what do I have to achieve in 6 months? And then what do I have to achieve in the next quarter? So depending on what taking charge of your life means for you, this is very individual. Create a timeline towards that future state. Write that timeline down. Write down the goals. What would be the things that you would have achieved that would fulfill this vision? Write those down. And write down the key milestones on the way, what it is that would be 1 year or 6 months or 3 months. Write all of that down. There's quite considerable research over a long period of time, 20, 30 years, that took university students who wrote down their, half the group were asked to write down their goals for the future, and the other half were, were not asked to. But somehow their goals were recorded by the interviewers. At the end of 10, 20 years, the ones who had written their goals down had a much higher success rate than the ones who had just told the interviewers what their goals were. Now, it's obvious in a way. So have a notebook that writes positively about what it is that you're creating in your life, in your future. Olympic coaches, the best Olympic coaches, will only accept people for coaching who have training logs on their Olympic performance, their Olympic sport. So perhaps you should have a training log on taking charge of your life, writing down what it is that you want, your goals, where it is that you want to go, only writing down the positives, not the negatives. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow. So we've got the vision, we've got a timeline, with some goals, some milestones written down. And of course, the final step is just to say, what could go wrong in creating this vision? And how can I build some things into the plan that support this vision happening in the way that I want it to happen? How can I do it without losing my house? How can I do it, change my relationship, for example, the relationship I'm in, without feeling emotionally unnourished in the process? Even someone who leaves a relationship will feel grief about that relationship. How do you get the emotional nourishment that you need? Actually, I'd like to remind you about the questionnaire that's in the workbook for yesterday about how to generate positive, more positive emotion in your life, because I don't need to cover that material again. It's in the workbook. It's in the first video. There's a questionnaire that will help you identify where are the areas where you could create more positive emotion and where are you weak? Perhaps you could do something about it. There's always two things. If you're good at something, you can do more of it because it's easy. So if you're good at, I'm good at spending time with friends and getting emotional nourishment from my friends. So if I need more positive emotional nourishment, then I just need to spend, I can just think of some friends and hang out with them. Not hard for me to do. The other side is if you think about somewhere where you're not so good at emotional nourishment, then you can think about, is it worth the effort of me shifting this? Is it worth me doing something about this? And so there are things that you can do to support yourself in the process of change. The other thing to say about the process of change is that this is an iterative process. This vision may change over a period of time. I don't expect you to be able to just write it down and make it happen like that. You want to be thinking about it. You want to think about the dream. You want to clarify the dream. You want to think about the plan. You want to clarify the plan. You want to test it on people. You want to test it on your nearest and dearest and colleagues and friends. You want to keep talking it through with people until it really feels something that you feel an inner feeling of commitment to. One of the problems of doing something live like this is that I'm talking a little bit too much to your heads. So if you think of the first taste of the vision that you have, whatever extent of a vision you have, do you think of that right now? How does that feel in your heart? How does that feel in your body? That's feedback to yourself. And some of that may be pleasant, warm feeling in your heart. And there may be some fear or some other feeling that needs to be attended to. And in fact, that feeling of fear, if you had that, or concern, is a version of the constructive critic. It's something needs to be addressed, something needs to be attended to. And, I've said that you could, if you're not so good at dreaming or feeling things through, get a friend to help you. You could, of course, use a coach, a life coach or a therapist, or, come to a personal development group where you can get supported on this sort of thing. So build a vision for your life. Build a vision of who you want to be. What's the ideal self-image? What's your ideal? If you were being all that you could be, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? And by the way, life calling is very connected to this. My life calling is helping people blossom. That's a key. I am someone who helps people blossom, starting with myself or for myself and others. And every day I achieve that to some degree. And to some degree I fail at that. I'm I can be impatient. There's lots of, opportunities for failure. But you don't think of failure as being a bad thing. It's only if you criticize yourself a lot is failure a bad thing. It's, have a vision of being someone that's, that it's really worthwhile, that it's not easy to be that person. That will make your life exciting. That will help you live long. Keep creating. However bad and difficult things get, have a vision that's strong enough for you to pick yourself back up and say, and now, how do I get back on track again? How do I get back on my horse again? Great to talk to you today. Really happy to be doing this series with you. Thank you for the likes and hearts. Great to have you here, Joe Hardy. So nice to see you online. And so today was about having a vision for your life. Yesterday was about positive emotions. Tomorrow is about having the self-belief that you need to create the life that you want, to have the life that you want. And that's really quite a tough and difficult topic, and I'm looking forward to it because you will never be more successful than the extent to which you believe in yourself, and that has some consequences. And then the final session on Friday is about small steps that you can commit to that will change your life in a practical way during the course of the days and weeks that come. Great to have you here today. By the way, the workbook with this really supports these 4 seminars. So I really suggest that you download the workbook and print it out, or at least have it on your laptop. Great to talk to you today. Great to see you here, Joe, amongst other people. And likes and hearts are always appreciated. And give me feedback about what else it is that you want in this series of videos or any other future series of videos. Great to have you here today. Take care.